Did you know that in 1998, a woman in San Francisco bought an antique mirror at an estate sale, only to realize that every reflection it showed was exactly 24 hours behind real time? And when she finally saw herself die in the mirror's reflection, she had exactly 1 day to prevent her own murder. But the mirror showed that her killer was someone she would never suspect. This is the story of the delayed reflection mirror, also known as the timekeeper's glass, an ornate Victorian mirror that has been linked to 17 deaths across 3 continents, and one impossible question that has never been answered. If you could see your own death 24 hours before it happens, would you be able to change your fate? Or would your attempts to avoid it be exactly what causes it to happen? Our story begins on a rain-soaked November morning in the Pacific Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. Sarah Mitchell, a 31-year-old art curator at a private gallery, was browsing an estate sale in a crumbling Victorian mansion that had belonged to the late Constance Bellamy, an elderly recluse who had died alone 3 months earlier. The house was filled with the accumulated treasures and trash of a lifetime. Rooms stacked with antiques, furniture draped in dusty sheets, and walls covered with portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow visitors through the gloom. Sarah had a good eye for valuable pieces, and she was methodically working her way through the rooms when she found it in what must have once been the master bedroom. The mirror stood nearly 7 feet tall, leaning against a wall draped in moth-eaten curtains. Its frame was elaborate mahogany carved with intricate designs that seemed to depict scenes of Judgment Day. Angels and demons intertwined, faces frozen in ecstasy and agony, hands reaching upward toward heaven or downward toward something darker. The glass itself was slightly tarnished with age, giving reflections a dreamlike, antiquated quality that Sarah found mesmerizing. The estate sale coordinator, a nervous woman named Patricia with nicotine-stained fingers and a twitchy way of speaking, noticed Sarah's interest. "That one's been here since the house was built in 1887, she said, wrapping her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. "Original to the property. Miss Bellamy's grandmother brought it from England. Family legend says it belonged to a judge who sentenced innocent people to death and used the mirror to watch himself pronounce their doom, admiring his own righteousness. Supposedly drove him mad. He smashed every other mirror in his house but couldn't bring himself to destroy this one." Sarah ran her fingers along the carved frame, feeling the deep grooves and intricate details. "How much?" Patricia hesitated, glancing at the mirror with obvious unease. "Honestly, you can have it for $50 if you can move it yourself. Nobody else will touch it. 3 different dealers came through here and wouldn't even make an offer. Said it gave them a bad feeling." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, Miss Bellamy died in front of that mirror. Her body was right there, facing it. Heart attack, they said. But her face... The coroner told me he'd never seen such an expression of terror on a natural death." Sarah should have walked away. Every instinct should have screamed danger, but she was rational, educated, 21st century. She didn't believe in cursed objects or bad feelings. She believed in profit margins and the resale value of genuine Victorian craftsmanship. She paid the $50, hired 2 college students to move the mirror, and had it installed in her apartment by that evening. Her apartment was a beautiful converted loft in the Mission District, all exposed brick and high ceilings, the kind of space that appeared in architectural magazines. The mirror looked perfect against the brick wall of her bedroom, imposing and elegant, a conversation piece that elevated the entire room. Sarah stood in front of it that first night, admiring how it made the space look larger, more sophisticated. That's when she noticed something odd. In the mirror's reflection, the digital clock on her nightstand read 11:47 p.m. But when she turned to look at the actual clock, it read 11:48 p.m. She checked her phone. 11:48 p.m. She looked back at the mirror. The reflection still showed 11:47 p.m. Sarah blinked, rubbed her eyes. The angle must be playing tricks, making it hard to read the clock properly in the reflection. She moved closer to the mirror, positioned herself to get a clearer view. But no matter how she looked, the clock in the reflection was consistently 1 minute behind the real clock. She watched for several minutes, and the gap remained constant. When the real clock changed to 11:49 p.m., the reflection showed 11:48 p.m. When the real world reached 11:50 p.m., the reflection showed 11:49 p.m. It was strange, certainly, but Sarah convinced herself there was a rational explanation. Maybe the old glass distorted light in a way that made the digital display appear to show a different time. Maybe there was something about the angle or the tarnish on the mirror that created an optical illusion. She went to bed, unsettled, but not yet frightened. The next morning, Sarah woke up and immediately checked the mirror. The reflection showed her bedroom exactly as it was, but the clock in the reflection was wrong again. It was 7:23 a.m. according to both her phone and her nightstand clock. But in the mirror, the reflection clearly showed 6:23 a.m. Not 1 minute behind anymore. 1 full hour behind. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She stood in front of the mirror, moving her arms, watching her reflection move in perfect synchronization. Everything else seemed normal. It was just the clock that was wrong. She took a picture of the mirror with her phone, capturing both her reflection and the clock's reflection. When she looked at the photo, the clock in the image showed the correct time, 7:23 a.m. Whatever was happening, it only occurred when looking at the mirror directly, not through a camera lens. For 3 days, Sarah monitored the mirror obsessively. Each day, the time gap grew larger. By the 4th day, the reflection was a full 24 hours behind. When she looked in the mirror on Thursday morning, the reflection showed Wednesday morning. She could see herself in the mirror getting ready for work, wearing the same clothes she'd worn the previous day, making the same movements, living through yesterday all over again. This was impossible. This violated every law of physics, every principle of reality that Sarah understood. But it was happening. The mirror wasn't just reflecting the present, it was reflecting the past. It was showing her yesterday, exactly as it had occurred, playing out in real time but 24 hours delayed. Sarah became fascinated, then obsessed. She would stand in front of the mirror for hours, watching herself from yesterday, seeing moments from a perspective that shouldn't exist. She watched herself eat breakfast, get dressed, talk on the phone, all the mundane activities of her previous day replayed in silent reflection. It was like watching a movie of her own life, except it was perfectly accurate, showing things exactly as they had happened. On the 7th day, something changed. Sarah was getting ready for work, standing in front of the mirror putting on earrings, when she realized something was wrong with the reflection. It was showing her from yesterday as usual, but the reflection was doing something she didn't remember doing. In the reflection, she watched herself from yesterday suddenly stop, turn pale, and rush to the window with an expression of shock on her face. But Sarah had no memory of that happening. Yesterday morning had been completely routine. She'd gotten ready for work without incident. The reflection was showing something that hadn't occurred. Sarah felt ice water flood her veins. The mirror wasn't showing the past anymore. It was showing something else. She watched, transfixed as her reflection from yesterday moved through the apartment, clearly distressed, checking the locks on the door, looking out the windows, moving with the jerky, frightened movements of someone who believes they're in danger. Then the reflection stopped in front of the mirror, this mirror, and stared directly out at Sarah with wide, terrified eyes. The reflection's mouth moved, forming words. Sarah couldn't hear anything, but she could read lips well enough to understand what her reflection was saying. "He's coming. Don't let him in." Sarah stumbled backward, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This was impossible. The mirror was showing yesterday, but it was showing a yesterday that never happened. Or was it showing tomorrow? Had the mirror somehow shifted from reflecting the past to reflecting the future? She grabbed her phone and called her best friend, Michael, an art history professor at Berkeley who specialized in occult objects and folklore. She tried to explain what was happening, her words tumbling over each other in a rush of panic and confusion. Michael listened, asked a few careful questions, and then went silent for a long moment. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice tight with concern. "You need to tell me exactly where you got this mirror, right now." Sarah gave him the address of the Bellamy estate. She heard typing on the other end as Michael searched for information. "Oh God," Michael breathed. "Sarah, listen to me very carefully. That mirror has a history, a very specific, very dark history. It's been documented in occult literature for over a century. It's called the delayed reflection mirror, sometimes the timekeeper's glass. It doesn't show the past, Sarah. It shows the future, but it shows the future 24 hours before it happens." "That's impossible," Sarah whispered, but she was staring at the mirror even as she said it, watching her reflection from yesterday, pacing frantically through the apartment, clearly terrified of something. "There are 17 documented deaths associated with that mirror," Michael continued, his voice urgent. "The pattern is always the same. The owner sees their own death in the reflection 24 hours before it happens. They have 1 day to try to prevent it, but every attempt to change their fate becomes part of the sequence of events that leads to their death. It's a temporal paradox. The harder you try to avoid what the mirror shows you, the more you ensure it happens." "How do I stop it?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "You can't see your own reflection in it," Michael said immediately. "That's the trigger. Once you see your own death, the sequence is locked. You have to destroy the mirror, Sarah. Right now, don't look at it again, just destroy it and get out of that apartment." But Sarah couldn't help herself. Even as Michael was speaking, her eyes were drawn back to the mirror. And this time, what she saw made her drop the phone. The reflection showed her apartment 24 hours in the future. It showed herself, tomorrow's self, lying on the floor in front of the mirror. There was blood, so much blood, spreading out in a dark pool beneath her body. And standing over her reflection's corpse was a figure, tall and thin, features obscured by shadows, holding something that glinted in the dim light. A knife. Sarah watched in mute horror as the figure in the reflection bent down, wiped the knife clean on Sarah's clothes, and then looked up directly at the mirror, directly at present Sarah, and smiled. It was a familiar smile. It was a smile she knew. The figure stepped into better light and Sarah saw the face clearly. It was Michael, her best friend, the person she'd just called for help. Sarah's mind reeled. This had to be wrong. Michael would never hurt her. They'd been friends for over a decade. He was kind, gentle, incapable of violence, but the mirror didn't lie. According to everything Michael had just told her, the mirror showed the future with perfect accuracy. She picked up her phone with shaking hands. Michael was still talking, his voice tinny and distant. "Sarah? Sarah, are you there? Did you hear what I said? You need to destroy the mirror right now." "I saw it," Sarah whispered. "I saw tomorrow. I saw myself dead." Michael went silent. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more controlled. "What else did you see?" "I saw who kills me." Another pause. "Who?" Sarah's survival instincts screamed at her not to answer, but she was so shocked, so terrified, that the truth spilled out before she could stop it. "You. I saw you standing over my body." The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for an eternity. Then Michael spoke, and his voice was calm, almost clinical. "Then I suppose you've figured out the real curse of the mirror. It doesn't just show you the future, Sarah. It creates the future. By showing you what will happen, it forces you to make choices that ensure it happens. You weren't supposed to die tomorrow, but now that you've seen it, now that you know it was me, you've changed the timeline. Your knowledge becomes the catalyst." "Why?" Sarah choked out. "Why would you kill me?" "I wouldn't have," Michael said, and there was something like genuine regret in his voice. "The mirror showed me my future 3 months ago, Sarah. It showed me in prison, arrested for your murder. I've spent 3 months trying to figure out how to prevent it. I tracked down that mirror, arranged for it to be at an estate sale I knew you'd attend, made sure the price was low enough that you couldn't resist. I thought if I could get the mirror to you, if you could see your own death, maybe you'd do something to prevent it, and the timeline would change. But if you never wanted to kill me, then I won't," Michael interrupted. unless you force my hand. The mirror showed you that I kill you tomorrow, but it didn't show you why. It didn't show you what happens in the next 24 hours that makes me do it. Maybe you attack me first, in a panic, and I defend myself. Maybe you try to destroy the mirror and accidentally hurt yourself, and I'm there and it looks like I did it. The mirror shows the result, not the cause. And now that you know, every decision you make will be an attempt to avoid that future, and every one of those decisions might be exactly what leads to it. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. So what do I do? You could trust me, Michael said quietly. Don't run, don't panic. Let me come over, and we'll figure this out together. Maybe if we both know what the mirror showed, we can work together to change it. But Sarah was already backing toward her door, already grabbing her keys and wallet. She couldn't trust him. How could she, after what she'd seen? Michael might believe he didn't want to kill her, but the mirror had shown her the truth. In 24 hours, he would be standing over her corpse. I'm sorry, she whispered, and hung up. Sarah ran. She left her apartment, got in her car, and drove. She checked into a hotel under a false name, paying cash, leaving her phone turned off so she couldn't be tracked. She spent the day in the anonymous hotel room, watching the clock, counting down the hours. If the mirror was accurate, she would die at 11:34 p.m. the following night. She had time. She just had to stay away from her apartment, stay away from Michael. And the future the mirror had shown her couldn't happen. But as the hours ticked by, Sarah realized the flaw in her plan. The mirror had shown her dying in her apartment. But what if the timeline had already changed? What if by running she'd created a new sequence of events? The mirror only showed the future as it would be 24 hours later. It didn't update. She had no way of knowing if her actions had changed her fate or simply set it in motion. At 10:00 p.m., 26 hours after she'd first seen her death in the mirror, Sarah received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo, taken inside her apartment. The mirror was visible in the background, and in the foreground, written in what looked like blood on her white wall, was a message. The future is now. Sarah's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped her phone. Someone was in her apartment. Someone who knew about the mirror. Someone who knew what she'd seen. She called the police, reporting a break-in, giving them her address. They said they'd send officers immediately, but Sarah couldn't wait. Some irrational part of her brain insisted she needed to see. She needed to look in the mirror one more time, to see if the future had changed, to see if she was still going to die in less than 2 hours. She drove back to her apartment, every rational thought screaming that this was exactly what she shouldn't do. That going back was probably what led to her death, but she couldn't stop herself. The mirror had a pull on her now, a gravitational force that drew her back no matter how hard she tried to resist. She arrived at her apartment at 10:47 p.m. The door was unlocked. The police hadn't arrived yet. Sarah pushed the door open slowly, her heart thundering in her ears, and stepped inside. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the streetlights filtering through the windows. And there, in her bedroom, the mirror stood exactly as she'd left it, tall and imposing and terrible. Sarah approached it slowly, unable to stop herself, needing to know what it would show her now. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at her reflection, but it wasn't showing the present. It was still showing the future, still exactly 24 hours ahead. And what Sarah saw made her blood freeze in her veins. The reflection showed her apartment as it would be tomorrow night at this exact time. And it showed Sarah herself, alive and unharmed, standing in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection with an expression of horror. And behind the reflections, Sarah, in the real apartment, tomorrow's apartment, was Michael, stepping out of the shadows, the knife raised. But that didn't make sense. The reflection was supposed to be 24 hours ahead. Right now it was 10:47 p.m. on Friday. The reflection should be showing 10:47 p.m. on Saturday. But Saturday had already become Friday. The 24-hour mark had passed. Sarah was seeing tonight right now from yesterday's perspective. The thought crystallized with terrible clarity. The mirror had been showing her this exact moment since yesterday. She'd been looking at herself, looking at the mirror, an infinite loop of reflection. And in that reflection, she was about to die. Sarah spun around and Michael was there, exactly as the mirror had promised, stepping out of the shadows of her bedroom, his face twisted with anguish and determination. "I'm sorry," he said, and there were tears on his face. "I tried everything to stop this, but you came back. You always come back. The mirror showed me that 3 months ago. It showed me that no matter what I did, no matter how I tried to warn you, you would come back to look at it one more time. And it showed me that I would be here. And it showed me that I would do this because it's the only way to stop the mirror from showing the next person their death." "Please," Sarah begged, backing away, but her back hit the mirror, the cold glass pressing against her spine. "Please don't do this. We can destroy it together. We can—" "Don't you understand?" Michael's voice broke. "I already destroyed it. 3 months ago, after I saw what would happen, I smashed it to pieces. I burned the pieces. I threw the ashes in the bay. And the next morning, it was back, perfect and whole, sitting in the Bellamy estate where it had always been. Can't destroy it. You can only pass it on. And the only way to pass it on is to become part of its story, to become one of the deaths it shows." The knife caught the light from the street lamps outside, and Sarah realized with sick certainty that Michael was right. Every decision she'd made to avoid this moment had led her here. Running away meant she'd had to come back. Seeing her death in the mirror meant she knew about it. Knowing about it meant she'd told Michael. Telling Michael had put them both in this impossible position. The mirror had shown her the future, and by showing her, it had created that future. There was never any escape. There was only the reflection, playing out exactly as it had been written in the glass 24 hours before it happened. Sarah opened her mouth to scream, to plead, to say something that might change the outcome. But the reflection had already shown what happened next, and the reflection was never wrong. The police found Sarah's body at 11:34 p.m., exactly as predicted. Michael was arrested at the scene, covered in blood, still holding the knife, muttering about mirrors and time and impossible choices. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, exactly as the mirror had shown him 3 months earlier. The apartment was cleaned and eventually re-rented. The mirror was taken into evidence, then released after the trial, then sold at a police auction to pay off Sarah's remaining debts. It was purchased by a young woman from New York, an interior designer with an eye for Victorian antiques, who thought the ornate frame would look perfect in her Manhattan loft. The mirror hangs there now, reflecting her beautiful apartment, showing her successful life. And if she pays close attention, if she looks very carefully at the digital clock on her mantle as it appears in the reflection, she might notice that the time is slightly off. Just a few minutes at first, then hours, then a full day. And when she finally sees something in the reflection that she doesn't remember happening, when she realizes that the mirror is showing her tomorrow instead of today, when she sees herself in the reflection doing something she hasn't done, yet she'll become curious, she'll watch, she'll try to figure out what it means. And eventually, inevitably, she'll see herself die. The curse of the mirror isn't just that it shows you your death. The curse is that it shows you trying to prevent it. It shows you running, fighting, making desperate choices to change your fate. And every single one of those choices is exactly what leads you to the moment you saw in the reflection. The mirror has existed for over a century. It has claimed 17 lives so far. But here's the question that keeps researchers and collectors awake at night. The question that has never been answered. What happens if you see your death in the mirror and simply accept it? What if you don't run, don't fight, don't try to change what you've seen? What if you just wait for the appointed hour and let the reflection become reality? Has anyone ever tried that? And if they did, would the mirror finally release them? Or would it find some even crueler fate, some punishment for the person who dared to accept death rather than futilely struggling against it? The mirror isn't talking. It just reflects, patient and eternal, showing tomorrow's tragedies to today's victims, turning knowledge into curse and certainty into the cruelest kind of hope. So if you ever find yourself looking at an antique mirror, If you notice that the clock in the reflection shows a slightly different time, if you see yourself in the glass doing something you don't remember doing, ask yourself this: do you really want to know what happens next? Because some knowledge can't be forgotten, some visions can't be unseen, and some reflections show you exactly who you'll be in 24 hours, when everything you tried to prevent has already come to pass. The young woman in New York hasn't noticed the time discrepancy yet, but she will. And when she does, she'll have exactly 24 hours to discover what 17 other people learned too late. That the future, once seen, becomes inevitable. And that sometimes, the only thing more terrifying than not knowing when you'll die is knowing exactly when it will happen and being powerless to stop it. How long do you think she has? And when she finally looks in the mirror and sees her own corpse staring back at her from tomorrow, will she make different choices than Sarah did? Or will she, like all the others, discover that the future reflected in the timekeeper's glass is already written, and all her desperate attempts to rewrite it are exactly what the mirror knew she would do all along?